Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat podcast. In this edition, I'll be joined by a very special guest, one of Australia's leading football journalists, a sports reporter for the Sydney Morning Herald. He has covered World Cups, Asian Games, A-League, Grand Slams and many key moments in between. An expert on Tottenham Hotspur boss Ange Postecoglou. He has covered Ange since 2011. Author of Ange Ball. This new book came out only a couple of weeks ago. A big welcome to the award-winning journalist, Vince Rugari. Vince, how are you?
Yeah, good evening, Chris. Very well. Thanks for having me.
Vince, great to have you here. Let's talk about the book, first of all. How did it come about? Of course, it's only come out a couple of weeks ago. How did it come about? How did you get the idea? And I've read that Ange actually approved this publication.
Yeah, so... Oh, look, I can't claim it was all my idea, to be honest. I've always wanted to write a book, particularly about Australian football, just because I'm, super passionate about it and just didn't really know how to go about it. A friend of mine suggested, actually, incidentally, and not related to how the book actually came about, but said to me about maybe 2 years ago when he was at Celtic and riding high, like, why don't you write a book about Ange? And I'm like, great idea, but I got no idea how to even get started with something like that. But anyway, the morning that Ange was appointed as Spurs manager, the publishers in Australia who published this book, Hachette, were doing a presentation in our offices, basically saying to journalists who are interested in writing a book, this is who we are, this is what it's about, this is the process, this is the kind of books we're looking for, etc., etc. I actually missed the meeting because I was filing stories about a bloody Australian being confirmed as Tottenham Hotspur manager. But I found the guy who gave the presentation afterwards in the office kitchen, and we had a chat, and I introduced myself, and Ange's name came up, which was the reason why I missed the whole thing. And he's like, oh, well, we're half thinking about maybe finding a writer to write a book about Ange. And then I was like, mate, I reckon it could be me. And we kept talking, and then during that period, like, ideas started to form in my head, and then I was just like, yeah, this is a great opportunity, because he's such a massive figure in Australian sport, and someone I've been pretty lucky to have followed his journey, or at least a lot of it, pretty closely, just coincidentally through the passage of my career. And I just thought, why not have a crack at it? And yeah, and as you mentioned, by the way, as well, Ange approving it, absolutely. I spoke to him when the opportunity came about, and I said, mate, I've got this, like, I could write a book here. What do you think? And he's like, just go for it, mate, was one of the things he said. He wasn't heavily involved. Like, it's my book about him, not his book, because time constraints. And I think also Ange wants to write his own book, an autobiography at the end of his managerial career, whenever that happens to be. Hopefully not for a while. But I think he wants to keep his powder dry a little bit for that. So, but he was more than happy for me to get stuck in and dive into his journey and put me in touch with some people. So he was pretty good about it.
Vince, on your Instagram, you say here, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And also what I wanted to ask is, has Ange actually seen a copy of the book now?
I'm not sure if he's seen a copy. He's definitely got he's got at least one version of the manuscript, if not the final version. And he did mention to me at one point that he wasn't going to read it for a while, just because I think he said, like, oh, I'd be nitpicking things, and you don't want that. And I think also he wants to keep his head pretty clear as well. But I like to think at some point he'll be one off season, lounging on a Greek island somewhere, on a sunbed with the book in his hand as well. But in terms of it being the hardest thing I've ever done, mate, bloody oath. Like, it took me. I only had 4 months to do the first manuscript, which was not a lot of time. I was in this most of the time. I was in this chair in this room in my apartment here in Sydney. No days off for 4 months. Getting like, yeah, it was really overwhelming, but also in a good way, because the subject matter is so engaging. I'm really passionate about football, but not just football, but some of my favorite memories as well, covering football, have been intersected with Ange's journey as well. Like the grand final wins of his Brisbane Roar team. I was starting out back then basically as a journo, so I was lucky about that. And it's a bit like working in sports journalism overall. Like, yeah, it's hard work sometimes and long hours, but you're operating in the toy box of society. So I will have a whinge from time to time about how hard the book was, but it was, looking back on it, great fun and so rewarding to see it sort of, getting into people's hands now.
Vince, you don't ever whinge about Ange Postecoglou himself, though, because you seem to be very defensive about him, because there's a lot of negativity around Spurs at the moment, and particularly Ange Postecoglou. And you do seem to be very defensive about him, which I love to see on your social media. How would you describe Ange Postecoglou as a person? For someone who's followed him for many, many years, how would you describe him?
Look, good question. I've tried to describe him in various ways in book form, but in coming up in verb form, putting me on the spot here, I'm trying to think. I mean, he is what he seems to be. I think is pretty clear. There's no second face there. There's no ulterior motives or whatever. He's pretty upfront. He's a pretty straightforward character. He'll tell you how it is. I think he's like that internally with his players and staff as well. I love it. I personally highly respect the way he goes about things. And having said that, though, he's still a manager. You can still criticize him. Back when he was in Australia, and particularly when he was with the national teams, I criticized his tactics sometimes because you just got to call it as you see it. But I think in terms of the Tottenham discourse that's happening at the moment as well, I sort of am a little bit bemused because it's just so early at the moment, and there's so many positive indicators that it seems like people are looking past or overlooking or whatever when they talk about the situation of the club at the moment. Not a lot of patience for, a pretty big job overall that's taking place and seems to be tracking okay already for me. I laugh because I feel like some of it is just sort of underpinned by just a general lack of respect for his previous achievements, and still a little bit of do you actually know what you're doing, mate? Which is, again, funny because every step of the way, and I sort of map out this in the book, pretty much at every level, the same things have been said about him. Naive, all this stuff, too rigid with his tactics, no plan B, possession with no cutting edge or whatever. It's part of the process that his teams usually go through. Now, and I've said this on a couple of other, different podcasts and appearances as well. Just because something's happened in the past a lot of times doesn't mean it's going to happen again in the future. Nobody can guarantee that. Football and life is just like that. But I've just seen too much evidence in the past to make me think it won't work this time if the club and the supporters just let it see through a little bit,
I very much sense that in the book, Vince, that you're kind of saying to Spurs fans, be patient because it will come. Because, you've seen this many, many times before, this negativity, the questioning around Ange Postecoglou, his style, his tactics, etc., etc. Do you think it will be successful at Tottenham?
I think so. Yeah, I do. Now, I don't know what successful looks like. I think he'll win a trophy.
You do?
At some point, I do. Some people will say that's just blind faith. And, maybe to some degree that there is a bit of faith in that. But I just believe in the guy's, well, first of all, in the guy himself, in his methods. They've worked at too many levels in the past before, different levels, different circumstances, different countries, for me to think that there's something wrong with them, that they suddenly won't function in England or the Premier League, like it's special or too different or whatever. It's still 11 players on each team, and the ball is round. It's still football. This guy's lived football. Football has been in his brain every single day at incredible levels of detail since he's like 5 years old. Basically, you're talking about a guy whose entire life is dedicated to this stuff and has the runs on the board as well. So I've seen nothing yet personally to make me feel like I should take that belief away. Something may come that does. As I said, I can talk to people about Ange's past, but I can't predict the future. But we're not there yet. What I'm seeing so far is trending correctly.
Vince, when I look at the stats, and you've probably seen these yourself, 4 clean sheets in 37 games. Ange has come out a number of times and said, we don't care about clean sheets. Even the goalkeeper, Vicario, has said the same thing. 7 defeats in 11. From April to September, only Wolves have lost more, which is 8. And Spurs seem to be really struggling with set pieces right now. I take it you have seen all of this before, but let's go back to the patience thing about the Spurs fans in particularly giving him the patience, because there were even boos the other night at the Coventry game at half time because Spurs hadn't had a shot on target. And you speak so heavily about that in the book that it doesn't matter what minute of the game it is, Spurs are still trying to score a goal. But in that game in particular, no shots on target. Even the Arsenal game, Spurs failed to score. So what have you made of the fan base and the mood in the last couple of weeks about Ange?
Yeah, it's gotten darker than I think it should. But don't get me wrong. I've watched almost all the games. Didn't watch the Coventry one, but followed it closely and watched a mini match. I got the sense of what was going on there, and it was, to be honest, relatively familiar to me in terms of Ange in his final year with the Socceroos. They were going through World Cup qualifying and similar sort of games in terms of having a lot of the ball and it just being a punishing watch because they really struggled to turn that into anything, particularly centrally, relying on a lot of crosses and stuff like that. That was the Socceroos at that time. And when Ange Ball doesn't work, it's freaking frustrating as hell to watch. There's no doubt about that. And there's reason to be frustrated. Absolutely. Things are probably tracking along slower than maybe I thought they would. I don't know. Then again, there's been so much disruption to the team, I think, in the first month of the season with Solanke and injuries to other guys and all that. It's not exactly as if things have been set up perfectly and smoothly for them. But I just think you just got to be a little bit more patient. We're 5 games in, and there was improvement last season from 8th to 5th with the loss of Harry Kane involved as well. I know the season ended badly, but there's a lot of games to be played yet. And I just think people probably need to take in the totality of the project a little bit more before they start calling for sackings and that sort of stuff. Because I'm like, all right, say the next couple of games are similar, and you guys sack Ange. What are you going to do then? Just start another project with another manager from day one, or go down a completely different road with another manager whose ethos doesn't match the club's in the same way that Ange's does with Tottenham and everything that club's about. I just don't get it. You just got to wait things out sometimes, or at least give them a chance to fail properly. As I keep saying, it may not work out, but we don't know that yet. It's too early to call.
Is it? I've seen you say this a couple of times as well, but I'd like you to talk about it. The fact that Ange is Australian, does that make him an easy target to say, "Oh, this isn't working. Get rid, Ange out"?
Yeah, partly because I still think a lot of people in Europe think we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to football. Which, whatever, we're used to that. But also there's still it's related, but there's just an underlying lack of respect for his achievements in terms of, he won the A-League a couple of times, but the A-League's crap. It must be crap because it's the Australian league, so it can't be that good. So it must be easy to win. Do you know what I mean? And it's the same thing with, and again, this is one of the recurring things about Ange's journey is that Scottish fans were saying that about his J-League wins, before he went to Scotland and won that competition. And now he's in England and the English fans are saying, well, what you did in Scotland, it's only Scotland. So it was only Scotland. It was only Japan. When he went to Japan, I think people were like, well, you won in Australia, mate. But, the J-League's really good compared to Australia. Can you make that step up? And it's just it's one thing to read someone's accomplishments on Wikipedia and jump to conclusions about what they might mean and how difficult they were to obtain or whatever. But it's another thing, and this is hopefully where people draw some understanding from the book, to understand those competitions and tournaments that he won. And it's all relative, right? There's no big budget team in the A-League, for instance. There's a salary cap involved, and you can only sign 5 players from overseas, and you've got to make things happen with a relatively limited bunch of Australian players. You know what I mean? I feel like you could drop a lot of really good coaches from around the world into the A-League, and they'd struggle to make a fist of it. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's the best league in the world or anything like that. I'm just saying you should respect someone who is able to replicate a game model or a system or a method of doing something in multiple countries, because it then suggests that it must work. So to me, that counts for a lot. I think to fans, particularly in England and Europe, whose worldview of football is a lot narrower, and I understand why, because you guys live where the game is, like in terms of the top end. But there's an ignorance there, I think, and that sort of underpins it all.
I think what a lot of fans are worried about, Vince, including myself to an extent, is about this high line. And, you know, so many fans are saying you can't play that high line in the Premier League. But of course, you speak about this in the book. You know, the fans were applauding after a 4-1 defeat against Chelsea inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, something I've never experienced. You know, losing 4-1 at home, and the fans were applauding because, you know, down to 9 men and we give it a go. And even Ange come out and said after that, well, that's who we are, mate. But what do you make of the high line now? Have you seen improvements from last season to now? And in terms of transfer windows, you also speak about this in the book about, you know, players buying in to the way that he wants to keep pressing all the time. And if he gets the right tools and the right players, and of course, getting the offloading a number of players as well from his squad that are not needed or not going to fit into what he wants to do. Is that going to be the downfall, this high line for him?
No. Well, look, maybe. But if this goes like I think it will go, there will come a time where it just falls into place. Like, if you're looking for me to like break this down in like ultra intricate sort of tactical whiteboardy kind of way, I'm not sure if I'm the guy to do that. But what I can say is similar questions have been asked of Ange's teams in the past, particularly around, you know, defensive fragility and certainly, you know, their aggression overall as a team, leaving them really open to attacks in the past. Although, you know, thinking about it, I'm not sure, you know, all of his teams have had a defensive high line position so high. But surely people can see that, and the evidence has been there so far in the opening part of the season for me as well. First of all, they look a lot more defensively solid for me. But also, like, the whole idea of Ange Ball is to capitalize on the mistakes that are generated higher up the field. And so that the point of the high line is, you know, you're creating that pressure in their half. And once 1 or 2 of those goals go in, because the conversion hasn't been there, and I guess the last bit of the puzzle is making this really, you know, dominance of possession and territory. Once you turn that into goals, then everything else falls into place, because games change when goals are scored and it all feeds into itself. And the high line doesn't seem so risky then when you're 2-0 up and the other team's got to try and, you know, lay a glove on you, basically, because then more opportunities will open up for yourself. And that's how you can start to dominate games in the way that Ange's teams have done before. So I don't think so, I guess, is the answer to the first question. And then just in relation to transfers, I have a feeling that Ange hasn't really got everything he's wanted so far. Doesn't mean he's not happy, but I think he'd probably prefer a little bit more higher end talent than bringing in, you know, it seems like a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-old players in this window. And those guys like Gray and Bergvall and all that, they're fantastic players already and will be great for the future. But it's a bit like, I guess, a kid at Christmas, right? You can ask for, you know, you can ask for everything. You're not going to get everything you want, right? You're going to get some things and you're just going to have to be happy with that. So, but it's definitely the case that Ange needs players, not only needs players who fit his profile in his squad for it to work, but needs to get rid of the guys who don't, because that, I feel like, drags it down at the bottom end in terms of maybe training levels and just the way things operate. Like, if you got everyone who's on the same page and fits the brief in the squad, and that's a better situation. And I feel like a lot of the deadwood, so to speak, has been cleared out, and definitely a lot of new faces. I think when you look at the squad and think about how many of these guys have been brought in by Ange, quite a few now. I just think, look, yes, I think we'd all wish more better players have been brought in earlier, but I think if you give this another couple of windows, the squad's going to build okay. I think it's already okay. I think, you know, there's certainly some patchy areas, but it's shaping up all right.
Vince, I think it's fair to say that Ange can be very ruthless in terms of offloading the players that he doesn't, you know, clearly want at the football club. But in terms of signings, particularly the window just gone, a lot of Spurs fans were saying we want marquee signings, we want big players, we want household names. But that's not really a thing that Ange Postecoglou does or has done in his career, is it?
Not really, no. Now that you mention it, I'm just trying to think of what are Ange's biggest signings in terms of profile ever at his clubs. And of course, a lot of this is restricted by the fact that a good half of his career has been in Asia. So capacity to sign well-known players really isn't there. But it's just not something he's done a lot of. And he's sort of spoken about this, I think, in the past as well, right? Was it before one of the Chelsea games last season where he got asked, what would you do if you had a transfer budget the size of Chelsea or whatever, like 200 million or something like that? And he's like, you might remember it better than me, Chris, but he said something like, I wouldn't like that. I'd rather spend buy 10 players for 20 million each rather than one 200 million player or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just not his thing. And that's fine as long as it works, I guess. And I get, particularly a club of Tottenham size and stature, you want to sign marquee players, big name players, particularly when your rivals are doing so. But for me personally, I kind of like the other method of finding the hidden gems or a player with potential and really unearthing that. For me personally speaking, as a fan, from my experiences, it helps me feel closer to those players a little bit when you go on that experience with them rather than just like the finished product has been plonked in a position in your club. Like, that's good, but I like a little bit more than that,
Vince, I know last season you come to London and you went to a Spurs game. What do you make of Spurs as a football club?
Oh, I went to two actually. I went to the home game against Liverpool with the VAR screw up, which was incredible. And I went to the game the next week at Kenilworth Road, which was also incredible for different reasons. What a place! But I would say I consider myself a Spurs fan now. Actually, all my in-laws, incidentally, were already Tottenham, so it's been very easy for me to fall in. I feel like it's a good club, a good fan base. What a special club in the history. It's really cool to dare us to do. That speaks to me. I think that's a wonderful sort of way to go about life and football. I like the whole, the game is about glory, all that stuff. I'm an admirer of that too, and it matches up so perfectly with Ange. That's why I think this is such a great marriage, because everything that the club says it's about, Ange says he's about too. I just wish everyone was just a little bit more patient and chilled out with it and just trust in the process and see where it goes rather than, there's a lot of probably unrealistic demands and impatience, and I get it as well with the history of the club and the lack of success over an extended period, and while watching your biggest rivals have success as well, that would darken any man's sort of outlook on life over an extended period of time, and I get why that's there. I just hope Ange is able to produce enough on the field to push that aside, because I have a feeling that the people who follow this football club will really like the end of this journey if they allow it to get there. I think they'll absolutely love it if they just have the ability to wait it out a little bit more.
Well, it's fair to say, Vince, we've gone through tough times. We've gone through so many managers. I completely agree with what you said earlier on the podcast that, if you were to sack Ange now, then what? Another project. You've got to give this guy time. You've got to give him the tools that he needs. Now, some journalists have said that they feel uncomfortable around Ange. And even in your book, in the chapter Who We Are, you said, looking back, there were things that I haven't liked or understood. Could you elaborate on that?
Oh, as much as I will stand up for Ange when he's copping what I think is unfair criticism or whatever, and I believe overall what he tries to do in terms of football will ultimately lead to success, there are moments where I've also been like, mate, what'd you say that for? Or why did you do this thing? Or why didn't you make this sub? Or why did you bring in this system at this point? What a massive risk. What are you doing? And yeah, from time to time, he says things as well. There's been many, many times, trust me, when I've been in press conferences with Ange Postecoglou, and I'm grateful that they weren't like his press conferences at Tottenham Hotspur, put on YouTube and shown to the world by, with thousands and thousands of page views, because there's been times I've asked some really stupid questions of Ange as well, and he's just gone, bang, mate, see you later. That's 6. It's part of I think what's so great about him. If you're a journo and you're going to an Ange Postecoglou press conference, you better be prepared, because otherwise he's going to sort of take you apart. But no, look, he's not perfect. Like he's not infallible. He does make mistakes. But yeah, what I was alluding to, I guess, in that part of the book is that, and I'm just trying to think of a couple of examples of what they are. But there's been times, particularly when he was with the Socceroos, where he said something and it just hasn't made sense to me, or like I've just completely disagreed with it. And that's because and looking back on it, and this is what I say in the book, like I was too busy thinking about the here and now and the short term and the thing that I've got in my head about this game or what's happening now. But Ange always seems to be thinking about much more than that, longer term, broader, bigger picture, things about the club or the team beyond his tenure, not just when he's there. And I just think, yeah, there's been a few times where I've looked back and it's just like, oh, that thing that I really disagreed with Ange, like I look back on it now and that makes total sense. What was I thinking? Sort of thing. That's happened to me a lot.
Vince, you state in the book, Ange relishes a challenge and actively seeks out the biggest one. He is always stuck to his guns. What did you make of the appointment when he was appointed as Spurs boss? Because I know Australia went crazy about this appointment. I was on most TV and radio channels when this appointment was made, asking my opinion on Ange Postecoglou. And I'll be honest, at that point, I didn't really know a lot about him, but Australia must have been going crazy at that point.
Yeah, it was. It was a huge deal. People got to understand, like, before Ange went to Yokohama F. Marinos in Japan, I think he might have been close to one of the first Australian coaches to ever work overseas in men's club football, at least. So it's not common for us to have anyone working outside of Australia anywhere, let alone Japan, let alone Scotland, and then let alone a Big Six club in the Premier League based in London, a global city, and a football club as storied as Tottenham Hotspur. It was massive news here. And I thought personally, I've been saying to people, my friends as well, like, football mates in Australia for a long time, like, I have a feeling Ange is going to coach a really big club one day. And this is back when he was in Japan or whatever. And it was a bit hard for people to see it. It was a bit like, nah, come on, how's he ever going to get there? And when he landed at Tottenham, I was like, first of all, what a great feeling to be able to tell everyone, I told you so, mate. But also I just thought, like, and I alluded to this before, what a great match, And this is part of the things that Ange looks for when he chooses a new team or club or whatever to go with. Like, it's not just about a job, a salary, a trophy, see you later. It's about what's deeper than that brings out something more in me other than, just the face value sort of challenge. Like, I think for him, the idea of playing a brand of football that really, echoes and rhymes with what that club is all about and bringing them up is like, that's a bigger challenge than just, can I win a trophy somewhere? You know what I mean? And he's spoken about that a few different times in a few different ways at a few of his previous stops. And yeah, like having an Australian managing a Premier League team situation, the reaction was massive. But I think for football fans who sat down there and thought about it a little bit, it was like, man, what a club for Ange to land at, because it matches what he does. And it's also like, for me, a little bit of a blank canvas, a club looking for a leader, looking for a reset, hasn't won much over the years, looking for a figurehead, someone who can be that club and set the sort of tone and the way you guys do things. And it was like, yeah, that's good. That's a great one for him to sink his teeth into. So I was really happy. Really happy.
Vince, also in the book, you said, I haven't always agreed with his tactics, decisions, or the way that he carries himself. But when I started out as a journalist, his team blew my mind. Now, talking about the tactics, you also mentioned in the book about when he was Australia manager, he went 3 at the back. And then that's what led to his departure from the national side. Do you think that he'll go 3 in the back anytime soon or ever with Spurs? Yeah, particularly when we've brought in Radu Dragusin, who has not had that much game time, and you've got Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero. It looks a fantastic trio. It could be a fantastic trio at the back. Do you think that Ange would ever do that?
I mean, I don't think you could ever rule it out. I don't think there's any reason why you'd say he wouldn't do it. And I think I write about this in the book as well. I just feel like there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about Ange in terms of people think he doesn't change anything ever, sort of thing. There's a difference between him being really committed and stubborn with his principles of play versus that doesn't mean he's wedded to a particular formation or system or the way it works on the field. You know what I mean? Like the underlying principles will remain the same forever, and that has been the case throughout everything. But within that, things change, and probably more, certainly not as much as in the past as it has in sort of Tottenham last season as well. Although, was it the Man City game where you guys did play a different system with like a no striker, almost like two sort of false nines, Maddison and someone else?
Yeah, and I must say it has been extremely frustrating for Ange because it seems like ever since he's come to the football club, he's never had a fully fit, available squad.
Yeah.
We've always had injuries and suspensions and other off-field issues. So I do get that.
Yeah, but he does change his system from time to time. He hasn't done it yet. I can only assume because he just thinks it's not the right move at this point. But the minute he does, expect the possibility of change at any moment, to be honest, because there's one example I draw upon all the time, which is so Brisbane Roar, the best thing they did, you know, their signature achievement was it was a 36-game unbeaten streak. Unbelievable, the longest streak in all of Australian sport. But they lost so 36 games and they lost 5 in a row. And one of the things that Ange did to sort of break the team out of their funk at that time, because obviously you can imagine you don't even have to see the games to understand if you go unbeaten in 36 and then lose 5 in a row and you've just broken a national record. That's a mental come down sort of thing. You know, that's an exhaustion. This team's hit the wall sort of thing. So what he did was they were playing 4-3-3 the whole time to break them out of their funk. He switched to a back three and it got them back into form. And then I think they went back to the back four. But if he sees a reason to do something, he will do it. So I think it may happen at some point because I agree with you. I don't mind the look of that three. I like Radu as well. I think he's going to play a lot more as well, especially with these, you know, with Europe starting and the cup games coming thick and fast soon as well. I think he's going to get his opportunities.
Vince, I love the way that you started the book. On the very first page, it was that quote from Antonio Conte, his famous rant at Southampton after the 3-3 draw at St Mary's. And then, of course, it goes into the Liverpool game. Everyone's singing Andrew's name and everyone is super happy having, you know, just won. You then go on to talk about the season, and later on you say players exhausted physically, mentally and emotionally. Now, my worry, I must say, and I think a lot of Spurs fans feel the same, in terms of what we have done in the transfer windows. Do you think that we've done enough this season? Because, of course, challenging in Europe as well as wanting to fight on all fronts in the League Cup, in the FA Cup, and, of course, Ange will want a good league finish. Do you think that Spurs have got a big enough squad in terms of quality?
I share that concern as well, to be honest, especially now. Like, so Richie's out for a while, he said yesterday, yeah. And there's there's the other one, Odebert could be out for a while. So already you begin to see, I guess, a little bit of the thinness of the squad. Like as you mentioned, like he's been pretty unlucky with this sort of stuff, has Ange. But and I dare say he would probably share this concern as well, to be honest. It's probably not his. This is what I mean when I say, you know, he'd probably wanted more in the transfer market. I reckon you guys are a little bit thin, just in overall numbers. So hopefully that you know doesn't unravel things this season, but I think it has the potential to, yeah, especially if like an injury crisis. I don't know if you'd call the current one an injury crisis, but if it grows much more, then you know you're exposing the lower rungs before you'd like to of the squad, if that makes sense.
In a recent press conference, Vince, quotes from Ange Postecoglou, he said, "It's the same. It's been a constant in my whole career. I don't ignore the tide. I keep swimming. I ignore the noise. I'm not going to change." As I say, as I've said already, you've seen this so often before. With the time and patience, do you think that he will get the time and patience with the fans and, more importantly, the board? Because I saw Nuno Espirito Santo, when the fans turn and the fans start to make the noise inside the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, do you think that he's going to get that patience with the fans? Because I completely agree. I'm completely on board with Ange. Certainly, having read that first chapter of your book, when you talk about seen it all before, seen it in the press conferences where journalists and pundits, etc., they will be very critical of Ange because he looks on the floor, not eye to eye contact. You've seen it all before. Last question for you: how do you see all of this panning out his career at Spurs?
Yeah, look, I'm going down with the ship, so to speak. Like I'm with this all the way. I think he's gonna turn it around. I think there'll be enough on the pitch to convince the fans to stick it out. The board, I'd like to think. Look, you probably know better than me on both of these things, to be honest, because you're closer to it. You've been talking about Spurs for a lot longer than I have, but my sense is from the things that Daniel Levy has said publicly, which aren't many, but he did some stuff last season where he spoke about learning from the mistakes of appointing Mourinho and Conte, and the fact that if Spurs want to play a certain way, and if they want to win a certain way, then they must understand that it's going to take longer. That's their words that came out of Daniel Levy's mouth not very long ago. And he offered Ange Postecoglou a 4-year contract. So what I take from that is they're going to give him the time. Because, and I got to say, going through the hiring process, I can imagine what Ange is like, and he would have made it very, very clear to the people he spoke to for this job that there is going to be a very difficult period before the success comes. And if you can wait that out, then I'm sure he told them, I will bring you success. No one can guarantee that, but I bet you that's what he said. So I think he's going to get the backing from the board. I could be wrong. I could be naive on that and the fans as well. But like I said, I haven't seen any reason for me to yank away my faith in this man, in this project. How can you not want him to succeed to some extent as well is one of the things I think about. When you think about his story, and I really hope people dive into the book and understand the full extent of it. But this is a guy who's, talk about pushing shit uphill. There's a Greek immigrant who moved to Melbourne when he was 5 years old.
Yeah.
Ends up managing in the Premier League. Like, you can think his tactics at the moment are terrible or whatever. You might want to give him the sack. But you got to take your hat off to someone who can accomplish basically the things that he has in his career, to go from where he has to where he is today, the way he carries himself publicly, his answers to questions in the media. You can see he can be a warm character, but he can also, like I said, if a journalist asks something stupid, he can shut that down pretty quickly as well. He won't cop nonsense lines of questioning. He's straightforward. It's like not many managers are like that. Managers are they're different species in some respects. I think to us regular human beings, they're not normal. Ange is he's a normal guy, but he's a really intelligent, passionate, smart guy. And I reckon he's going to bring success to Tottenham Hotspur. And it could be I look silly for saying that, but that's my belief.
Well, I certainly hope so. Vince, we'll end on this because I thought this was so interesting how you wrote this in the book. Each time Ange Postecoglou has taken charge of a new team, it's been roughly the same sort of pattern. Obviously, teething issues with flashes of real promise, disjointed pressing and passing, bad defending, which of course we have seen, widespread questioning of Postecoglou. And I must say, I smiled through reading all of this because, it's happening exactly now. His appointment of those who appointed him are questioned. His methods are questioned. The losses pile up. Pundits will say his team have been figured out and that a plan B is required immediately. The word naive will get floated around. You said that earlier in the podcast. Critics will point out that he spends most of the time in press conferences looking at the floor, and the industry will smell blood. Vince, so thank you so much for coming on. As I said, I did have a lot of questions for you, but I know that both of us have got things to do today. We've got to page 4 of my notes. I actually had 38 pages of notes, so I don't know how long this podcast would have been. So thank you so much.
We can do a part 2, mate. Once you finish the book, I'm sure you'll have more as well.
Absolutely. Well, Let's just tell everyone where you can find this book, Vince, because it is a wonderful read. I haven't read all of it, but from what I've read so far, it is absolutely brilliant. And I went to bed last night reading this. So thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find the book, Vince, and where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, all good bookstores, I'm reliably told. Online, Amazon, just Google Ange Ball and my name, Vince Rugari. I'm sure it'll come up. People have asked me as well, what's the method to buy the book that will give me the most amount of money? The answer is I have no idea. Just buy the book. It's not just buy the book, not for me, but buy the book for you, so you guys can understand like who this guy is, where he comes from, why he is the way he is. Wait it out a little bit longer, and then make a judgment on this guy. But understand him fully. And yeah, you guys have got a special manager on your hands. I hope you see that, and I have a feeling there's going to be some great things at the end of this journey if everyone has the patience to see it out. So thanks, Chris, for having me on. Thanks to everyone for the support around the book as well. Yeah, I hope people grab it and enjoy it.
Well, Vince, thank you so much, and I will take you up on that part 2. So we'll talk soon.
Catch you soon then, mate. Let's do it.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, and come on, you Spurs.